Hello, I'm Esther Gitu-Ewart. It's Monday, March 27th. This is Africa 54. U.S. Vice President Kamala Harris is in Ghana Monday as part of a three-nation tour of Africa that will also take her to Tanzania and Zambia. We'll have in-depth coverage of her visit. Paul Rusesabagina, who was portrayed as a hero in the film Hotel Rwanda, was released from a Rwandan prison Friday following intense diplomacy by the United States. We begin in West Africa, where U.S. Vice President Kamala Harris is visiting Ghana as she begins a week-long trip to Africa, part of Washington's drive to counter growing Chinese and Russian influence on the continent. Harris is announcing a $139 million aid package for Ghana for 2024. Harris spoke in Accra Monday at a joint press conference with Ghanaian President Nana Akufo-Addo.
The median age on the continent of Africa is 19. Think about what that means in terms of potential. Think about the fact that by 2050, 1 in 4 people occupying a place on Mother Earth will be on this continent, and what that means. The trip that I have taken to come here, being here, is about recognizing the incredible opportunity with a sense of optimism about what we do now and how it will impact the world going forward.
Vice President Harris is also scheduled to visit Tanzania and Zambia. For more on Vice President Kamala Harris' visit to Ghana, reporter Cedric Abe spoke to people on the streets of Accra to get their thoughts on what the trip means to them.
So I'm quite excited about the U.S. Vice President's visit to Ghana, because I believe there's a lot that the Ghana and the USA can learn from each other, especially in these global economic times, challenging times. And the Ghana and the USA have enjoyed strong economic partnership that has dated as far back to 1957. And looking at what the government of Ghana wishes to do in terms of transforming positively the structure of the economy by leveraging on digitization and by establishing industries across the country, I think there's a lot that we can do with the U.S.
The U.S. and Ghana have been collaborated a lot, since the beginning of Ghana, that's since independence. I know most U.S. governments, even in recent past, President Clinton, President Obama, President Bush have all visited Ghana, and the two countries, as U.S. Ghana, have enjoyed a lot of collaborations together from in the area of tech, democracy, even in training together with our militaries. I think both countries have collaborated beautifully together, and the Vice President Kamala Harris visiting Ghana is also another enforcement that is happening to the to both countries, as Ghana and the U.S. And I believe our relationship is going to be stronger, even to address the global economic crisis that the whole world is facing currently after the COVID and then during the Russia-Ukraine war.
People on the streets of Accra, Ghana, they are sharing their thoughts on Kamala Harris's visit to their country. Although Ghana and the United States have a close friendship dating back to 1957, China is now a far larger trading partner with Ghana than the U.S. Kent Mensah has more from Accra.
In the last decade, Ghanaian trader Gifty Ama Owusu has been selling Chinese textiles, including satin fabric, in the busy central business district of Accra. She tells VOA, although Chinese products are of poor quality, they are affordable and sell more quickly than expensive ones imported from the US and other Western countries.
Cheap.
They're cheap, with as little as 100 Ghana cedis.
you can buy something to wear. So why won't Ghanaians patronize Chinese goods rather than those coming from the U.S. and Europe? Textiles from the U.S., or even the locally made ones, are very expensive despite being of good quality.
Over the years, China has built up bilateral and trade relations with Ghana. On Tuesday, construction began on a $20 million Foreign Ministry Annex building in Ghana that will be entirely paid for by China. Accra, which faces its worst economic crisis in decades, is currently in talks with Beijing to restructure its $1.7 billion debt to China. But one expert says Ghana has not seen a key benefit expected from Chinese infrastructural projects.
China is bringing in all these manufacturing entities, but we are not seeing technology transfer. You know, a lot of it has been said in the forum on China-Africa cooperation that, you know, many of them, we've had about 11 or 10 of such conferences where the issue of technology transfer has been said consistently as the Chinese come into Africa and engage us. But we are not seeing this, you know, so we are in a hard place.
Harris's visit to Ghana is meant to build on the recent U.S. African Leaders Summit that President Biden hosted in Washington in December. The U.S. government has over the years supported Ghana in areas such as healthcare, agriculture, trade, and security. Amwa said the U.S. needs to re-strategize to keep its allies in Africa before losing them to China.
If they want to break into the African market again, or at least maybe reposition themselves, I think that should be the issue. Reposition themselves so that they engage us at the level of a win-win kind of engagement. These are some of the things they must begin to look at if they're really interested. Trade, yes. Aid, maybe. Investments. Which kind of investments? These are big questions.
Asked about the Vice President's visit, Ghana's Deputy Foreign Affairs Minister, Kweku Amprechum Sapon, told VOA via text message that Ghana-US relations continue to grow and that Ghana is looking forward to leveraging the opportunities that come with Kamala Harris's visit. Kent Mensah for VOA News, Accra, Ghana.
Ghana defaulted on most of its $29 billion external debt last year as interest payments and inflation soared. China is Ghana's biggest bilateral creditor with about $1.9 billion of debt. Ghana still needs to negotiate a resolution with its private international bondholders and bilateral creditors. For more insight on the visit by Vice President to Africa, I'm joined by Kwaku Nuama, Professor of International Politics at American University here in Washington. Professor Nuama, how important is the visit by Harris to Ghana with respect to the debt crisis the country is grappling with?
Thanks for having me, Esther. So as you mentioned, Ghana cannot pay its bills. And it's not just the economic problems, there's also a security problem in West Africa, which may impact what happens in Accra. So Vice President Harris is coming at a fragile time, and hopefully the Ghanaian authorities can lay out clearly what they need from the United States, as she also puts America's concerns on the table. So this is coming at a time when everybody has some kind of needs, and hopefully they can figure out how to help each other.
Professor, we know that China and Russia are aggressively pursuing the continent. They are engaging in different businesses. How can the United States engage with Africa as a key business partner?
So that's an important question. As African countries struggle economically, China has been the place they run to. In the past, American soft power was enough to keep Africans in the American sphere. That's no longer enough. United States is going to have to step up and do serious stuff, major investments, helping these countries break the dependence on China, but also the cycle of debt crisis and fiscal policy issues and youth unemployment, major problems that these countries face. Ghana, for example, has problems of youth unemployment, but also energy production issues. Those are things that the United States has helped in the past. It's going to have to scale up the kind of help that it provides, because what has been done so far is not enough. And so hopefully there's something more that the United States can do rather than invest in, happy talk and hope that soft power alone will keep Ghana by its side.
Professor, what will be the overall value first for the United States and also for Ghana because of, this Vice President's visit to that country?
So the United States is looking for allies in Africa and also looking to reassure its existing allies that they can rely on it. So as this war in Ukraine turns into more of a proxy war between the United States and Russia, America is going to need its allies, particularly those that claim to be democratic, to stand by it. And Ghana is one of those countries, and so it needs to be supported. Ghana is also a democracy in the sub-region. It's a stable country, and it's going through turbulent times. So this is the time to lend a hand, because if Ghana folds, there's no telling what will happen to the region. We already see Russia in Burkina Faso. On a personal note, the Vice President herself stands to benefit tremendously from this trip if it goes well, as she tries to demonstrate her ability to lead in the Democratic Party. And then on a smaller level, the Vice President of Ghana, Dr. Bawumia, who is running for his party's nomination, might also be able to use this as an occasion to cement his place in the polka system in Ghana. So there are benefits for both sides. The Ghanaians obviously are looking for help with security and with economic assistance, and it's good to see that the United States has already put some money on the table. But it's not just money; they are also sending a technical advisor to help the Ghanaian government deal with their debt problems, and so hopefully those things go a long way to help them stabilize the economy.
Professor Nwama, thank you very much for your insight.
Thanks for having me.
Kwaku Nwama is a professor of international politics at American University here in Washington, D.C. Kenyan police fired tear gas to disperse anti-government protests on Monday over the high cost of living after the opposition vowed demonstrations would go ahead despite a police ban. Police clashed with stone-throwing demonstrators in Nairobi's largest informal settlement, Kibera, where protesters set tires on fire, defying a warning by the police inspector general not to demonstrate because the rallies would be illegal. Security was tight, with riot police stationed at strategic points in Nairobi and patrolling the streets, while many shops were shut and train services from the capital's outskirts into the central business district were suspended. Kenyans have mixed feelings regarding the protests that have been called by Raila Odinga, the main opposition leader. Reporter Sharon Paranga has more from Nairobi.
We are within Nairobi on a day when the opposition leader organized for mass protests, claiming that the high cost of living is affecting a number of Kenyans. Now, this is going to be the second time that the opposition leader is planning for mass protests. And now I'm going to speak to some of the business people in Nairobi, and they're going to talk to us on how these demonstrations are affecting their businesses.
Kwa kweli kazi ya leo imeathirika vibaya sana.
Our work today has been greatly affected, especially the transport sector. No one is traveling, our buses are parked, we are not making money. Those who invested in the transport sector are suffering because they have loans from banks.
We are asking the president to ensure prices of basic commodities are reduced. We are really suffering. Things are very expensive. We're living a life we cannot afford, and this is not about tribal politics. We are one Kenya.
A majority of Kenyans want the government and the leaders of opposition to reach a truce, saying demonstrations are affecting their businesses.
I pray our government and opposition reach an agreement because our economy is not performing well. I urge the government to stop fighting the opposition. Let them focus on how they can improve the life of struggling Kenyans. If they do that, no one will take part in demonstrations.
Mr. President, azingatie mafuta.
The president should focus on the price of oil. If the price of oil increases, the price of basic commodities increases.
Citizens of Nairobi speaking to reporter Sharon Baranga. Fiercely outspoken Rwandan government critic Paul Rusesabagina, whose efforts to save people during the 1994 genocide inspired the Hollywood film Hotel Rwanda, has been freed from prison after more than 900 days behind bars. His sentence was commuted following intense diplomacy by the United States. Alice Rizzo has more.
Paul Rusesabagina, the man portrayed as the hero in the film Hotel Rwanda, was released from a Rwandan prison on Friday, according to U.S. officials. His sentence was commuted following intense diplomacy by the United States. Rusesabagina, who is a permanent resident of the U.S., was accompanied by a U.S. embassy official as he was moved from prison to the residence of Qatar's ambassador in Kigali late on Friday. He was sentenced in September 2021 to 25 years over his tie to a group opposed to Rwandan President Paul Kagame that has an armed wing. U.S. President Joe Biden issued a statement welcoming Rusesabagina's release and thanking the governments of Rwanda and Qatar for making it possible.
And many other different languages.
The film Hotel Rwanda is about Rusesabagina's story when he saved over 1,000 refugees during the Rwandan genocide in 1994, including his own family, by sheltering them in the hotel he managed at the time. Washington's historically close ties with Rwanda had been strained by the case, and by U.S. allegations denied by Kigali that Rwanda has sent troops into neighboring Democratic Republic of Congo and supports rebels there. Rusesabagina also denied the charges against him and boycotted the trial, which supporters called a political sham. A spokesperson for Rwandan President Paul Kagame tweeted that the release was, quote, the result of a shared desire to reset U.S.-Rwanda relationship. Rusesabagina will remain in Rwanda for a couple of days before traveling back to Doha and then the United States, officials said.
Alice Rizzo of Reuters filed that report. Rwanda government spokesperson Yolande Makolo spoke on the recent release of Paul Rusesabagina, a citizen of the Central African nation and U.S. resident who in 2021 was sentenced to 25 years imprisonment after being found guilty of terrorism. Makolo says the case of the 68-year-old Rwandan attracted international attention after his story was portrayed in the Hollywood film Hotel Rwanda. For more on what led to Rusesabagina's release, VOA's James Buddy spoke to Makolo.
Paul Rusesabagina and Kalist Savimana, along with 18 members of the FLN militia that were convicted with him, had their prison sentences commuted by presidential order. First of all, if you know the recent history of Rwanda, and as President Kagame has said, Rwandans have forgiven the unforgivable. Even people who committed genocide here have found themselves freed and back in the community. So with this case, it's important to note that there is consensus that serious crimes were committed by Rusesabagina and his FLN militia, for which they were convicted. And under Rwandan law, commutation of sentence does not extinguish the underlying conviction or the obligation for compensation to the victims as decided by the court. Paul Rusesabagina made a request for clemency as provided for by our laws. He accepted moral responsibility on the crimes he was convicted of, and he has also made important pledges for his future conduct, including his exit from politics.
Yolande, did your government release Mr. Rusesabagina just to avoid international isolation or pressure?
There has certainly been a lot of international interest in this case, mainly because of a successful Hollywood film from, 15 or more years ago. The U.S. was particularly interested, given that Rusesabagina is both a Rwandan citizen and an American resident. However, Rwanda has always maintained the serious concerns we have with this case, especially around political violence by armed groups, including those that are led by people operating from the safety of developed countries. This is something that the United States has agreed with us on, as laid out last night, in last night's statement by the State Department, as well as the decision by the US to retroactively rescind the wrongful detention assessment. So suddenly there were a few false starts, but Rwanda and the US were able to have constructive discussions carried out on the basis of mutual respect and an understanding of the real issues, particularly Rwanda's concerns about the safety and security of our population.
That was Rwanda government spokesperson Yolande Makolo. Still to come, a former Botswana president vows to vigorously campaign against his hand-picked successor. We'll be right back. In other news, the Tunisian Coast Guard says at least 29 migrants from sub-Saharan Africa died when their two boats sank off the coast of Tunisia as they tried to cross the Mediterranean to Italy. In the last 4 days, 5 migrant boats have sunk off the coast of the southern city of Sfax, leaving 67 missing and 9 dead. Burkina Faso on Monday announced the suspension of all broadcasts by the France 24 news channel after it aired an interview with the head of Al-Qaeda in North Africa. France 24 earlier this month aired an interview with Yazid Mebarek, also known as Abu Ubaida Yusuf al-Anabi, who had claimed the title of Emir of Al-Qaeda in the Islamic Maghreb. And former Botswana President Ian Khama is vowing to vigorously campaign to dethrone his hand-picked successor, Mokgweetsi Masisi, now a bitter rival, whom he accuses of being a threat to democracy in the 2024 presidential election. Khama is preparing to return from South Africa to build the opposition into a coalition to remove Masisi through the ballot box. African Grassroots Hoops runs a basketball leadership academy for young women with the lofty goal of getting a basketball in the hands of every young African. Vicky Stark reports from Cape Town.
23-year-old Shanice Goliath earns a living coaching basketball. She's having a bit of fun with friends and family before heading off to coach in the upmarket suburb of Sea Point. Goliath says she decided to coach 6 years ago after being selected by African Grassroots Hoops to go to Washington, where she and 10 other young women ages 13 to 21 participated in a leadership program funded by the U.S. State Department.
We had we would go to workshops and stuff, and then they said like, what do you want to do when you get back? Like, what are you going to give back to the community? So I decided I want to start coaching.
She grew up in Heideveld, a rough neighborhood in Cape Town, South Africa, where gangsterism and drugs are rife.
And being inside the basketball hall, it always like takes everything away from like whatever's going on outside. That's like a blockage for me. It just take me away. It's like my happy place, basically.
No balance. You can't finish a shot.
Sibongile Sophile, 19, is also a product of the African Grassroots Hoops coaching program for girls and young women. She says her mission is to help kids see that basketball can change their lives.
The friends that I grew up with, most of them are pregnant. Some of them are dropped out. They dropped out of school. Some of them, they've been in prison and came back. So I was like, okay, I'm the only person who's who's doing the right thing here. So I need to be an example to my friends.
African grassroots hoops was started in 2014 by South African Vincent Ntunja, the assistant coach of the Cape Town Tigers of the Basketball Africa League, and American Giovanni Freeman.
We decided if we can develop you as a leader, then it would go way beyond the basketball. So basically what we're doing is we're giving them a support system. We're doing everything we can to open their eyes to a bigger world and opportunity in the basketball world and beyond.
He says basketball on the continent is growing, bringing many opportunities. The group will be hosting the Youth Day Classic basketball tournament at the prestigious Cape Town International Convention Centre in June. Some of the young women will be coaching and others working as project managers. Vicky Stark for VOA News, Cape Town, South Africa.
And that's our show for today. As always, we invite you to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. From all of us here in Washington, thanks for watching.
Children, especially girls, have been subjected to alarming rates of gender-based violence. We are especially distressed by the 41% increase worldwide in the abduction of girls, who are then commonly subjected to gender-based violence, such as forced marriages, rape, and other forms of sexual violence. Children in conflict zones face acute protection challenges. In Ethiopia, thousands of children have been forced from their homes, separated from their families, and subjected to sexual violence. In Afghanistan, patterns of child, early, and forced marriage and recruitment have been crippling to the physical and emotional well-being of children and youth. Girls have been particularly impacted as there have been instances amounting to early and unsafe pregnancies. In Ukraine, Russia's brutal full-scale invasion is having a devastating impact on children. It has been widely reported that Russia is engaged in extensive relocation of Ukraine's children within Russian-controlled and Russia-occupied territories of Ukraine, as well as the transfer of children to Russia itself. When we take preventive steps to protect children, we are protecting and safeguarding our collective future. To prevent future violations and abuses against children, we must make clear to those who commit these acts that they will be held accountable.